In the last 24 hours, something shifted. The Guthrie family broke their silence with a new statement, and what they said in every single word was chosen with surgical precision. Nothing in that statement was accidental. Nothing was casual. It was crafted, reviewed, and approved by investigators before it reached the public. And buried inside those carefully constructed paragraphs are two details that this investigation has never publicly confirmed until now. The first tells us that something specific happened on the evening of January 11th, 3 full weeks before Nancy was taken. The second tells us that the FBI has guided this family to confirm publicly what this channel has been documenting for weeks, that the person responsible for taking Nancy Guthrie is not a stranger from another state. They are from Tucson. They are local. They may be living their ordinary life right now within miles of where Nancy's medication is still sitting untouched on the counter, where she left it 50 days ago. And then there's the radio interview. The sheriff of Pima County sat down with a local Arizona station, his guard visibly down, his tone relaxed, and said things in that setting that he has never said on national television. Some of what came out answers questions this investigation has been carrying for 7 weeks. Some of it raises questions that are going to be very difficult to walk back. All of it is in this video. And by the time we are finished, you are going to understand why Day 50 is not just a number, it is a turning point. For weeks before this statement arrived, the Guthrie family had gone quiet. After the memorial visit on March 2nd, where Annie Guthrie's audible weeping stopped the country, there was silence. Savannah visited the Today Show. She was photographed with colleagues. She has not returned to air. The public silence from one of the most recognizable families in American media became its own kind of message. The silence of people who have been instructed by investigators to say nothing and are holding that instruction together while their mother remains somewhere in the Arizona desert. Then, this statement arrived. And the first thing to understand about it is what kind of document it actually is. This is not a personal family message written in grief and posted to social media. This is an operationally constructed public communication. The Savannah Guthrie is a journalist with over 2 decades of experience, choosing words for a living. Annie Guthrie is a published poet. These 2 women understand precisely what language carries and what it leaves behind. And the investigators sitting beside them as this statement was crafted did not allow a single phrase to remain that did not serve a specific investigative purpose. Every sentence in it is intentional. Every word earns its place. Which means when something appears in this statement for the first time, it is because the investigation has reached the point where it needs the public to know it. The statement opens by expressing gratitude to the people of Tucson and the Southern Arizona community. And then it says something the family has never said publicly before. Now, they state their continued belief that it is Tucsonans, the people of Tucson, the greater Southern Arizona community, who hold the key to finding resolution in this case. That sentence has never appeared in any official Guthrie family communication before this week. And it matters enormously because it is the public confirmation of something law enforcement sources have been saying privately since the first days of February. The person who took Nancy Guthrie is local. They are not a stranger who drove in from another state and drove back out. They are from Tucson. They are part of the community being asked to find them. They may have driven past the memorial. They may have been present during media coverage at the scene. In other cases across this country, that has happened before. The perpetrator returning to watch, and the family, guided by the FBI, just told the entire city to look at the person standing next to them. That confirmation is not a new theory. It is the public validation of a framework this series has been building for weeks. The 20 years of Saturday night drives through the Catalina foothills. The intimate familiarity with a specific street and the camera positions on the houses along it. The social network that kept 2 men connected to the Guthrie family for nearly 2 decades. The family just confirmed what the evidence has been pointing toward, and they did it in a statement the FBI signed off on. Then comes January 11th, and this is where the statement shifts from emotional to forensic. The family specifically asks the public to search their memories around the late evening of January 11th, in addition to the night of January 31st and the early hours of February 1st. January 11th, a Sunday, 3 weeks before Nancy was taken. This date has been circulating inside law enforcement channels since the earliest weeks of this investigation. Neighbors living closest to Nancy's home have confirmed to reporters that when FBI agents came to their doors in the days and weeks after the abduction, agents asked specifically whether those neighbors had seen anything unusual on January 11th and whether their camera systems had recorded anything from that particular evening. Not February 1st, not January 23rd, January 11th. A date 3 weeks before the crime. The FBI has been asking about it privately since February. But the family has never named it publicly until this statement. And that shift from private investigative focus to public confirmation is not a casual decision. It means investigators believe that someone in the Tucson community holds footage, a memory, a text message, or an observation from that Sunday evening that could materially advance this case. It means the canvass they conducted privately did not fully close the question of what happened on January 11th, and it means they now need the public's eyes on that date specifically. The photographs recovered from Nancy's Google Nest camera, extracted by Google engineers from back-end servers after the device was removed, have been reported by 4 independent television networks through 4 separate law enforcement sources as coming from different days. But not different moments of the same night, different visits on different days. Sources have indicated that one of those visits may align with January 11th. If that is accurate, someone stood at Nancy Guthrie's front door 3 weeks before they took her, not to enter that night, to observe, to confirm the camera positions, the gate, the layout, the lighting, to verify intelligence they already had before committing to the operation. Now look at the full pattern of dates this investigation keeps returning to. January 11th is a Sunday evening. January 24th is a Saturday. Neighbors have confirmed FBI agents asked specifically about that date as well. February 1st falls on a Sunday morning. Every significant date in this investigation's pre-crime timeline clusters around weekends. Every single one. That is not coincidence. That is a schedule. A recurring window of availability that does not exist during the working week. And that pattern points towards someone whose professional obligations confine their activity to weekdays. Someone for whom evenings and weekends represent the only window in which this level of planning and reconnaissance was possible. A teacher, for instance, is in a classroom from Monday through Friday. Their Saturday nights belong to no institutional schedule. And for one person connected to this case, Saturday nights in the Catalina foothills had been a standing fixture of their life for 20 years. And then the statement closes with a line that stopped the country. The family writes that they want to celebrate Nancy's beautiful and courageous life, but that they cannot do that until she is brought to a final place of rest. Read that again. Not until she comes home. Not until she is found and returned to us. A final place of rest. That is the language of a family that has privately accepted Nancy Guthrie is no longer alive. That the question this investigation is now trying to answer is not whether she can be saved. It is whether she can be found. Whether they can bury her. Whether they can say goodbye with some kind of confirmation rather than a void that has been widening for 50 days. Savannah Guthrie chose those words. Annie Guthrie allowed them to remain. And the investigators reviewing the statement before it went public did not ask them to change it. That detail, the fact that the FBI permitted those 4 words to stay, tells us something about what the forensic evidence is currently suggesting about the likelihood of Nancy's survival. You do not let a grieving family publicly process the probable death of their mother in a statement designed to generate investigative tips unless the evidence is pointing in a direction that makes that processing honest rather than premature. The family's not giving up. They are being truthful. And that truth, carried in 4 words, chosen by 2 women who know exactly what language means, is the most painful update this case has produced in 50 days. They write that they cannot grieve. They can only ache and wonder. If you have followed this case from the first week, if you have watched Savannah hold herself together at the Today Show desk, if you have heard Annie weeping at the memorial, those words are not abstract. They are the sound of a family suspended between loss and the absence of confirmation, unable to mourn and unable to move forward, just waiting. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be brought home, whatever that now means. Now to the sheriff. Chris Nanos sat down with KVIAAM, 1030 local radio station in Tucson this week, and gave an interview that sounds entirely different from everything he has produced for national television. The setting was casual. The tone was relaxed. The hosts appeared comfortable with him, and he appeared comfortable with them. And in that comfort, a version of Chris Nanos emerged that the national media has not seen before. A man with his guard genuinely down, speaking more freely than he has in any press conference, and revealing in the process a set of positions and contradictions that demand careful examination. Let us listen to some part of it.
What happened here eventually? I believe we will, yes. I have full faith in my team's ability. We're working with the FBI. We're working with several labs around the country on this. We're working with forensics examiners of digital video media. There's just a lot going on. Not a cold case. Not even close.
Hold that answer against what he said in the opening weeks of this investigation. Early on, when reporters pressed him on the decision to release the crime scene in under 20 hours, he acknowledged on the record that it may have been a mistake, that if he could go back, he might have held the scene longer. Multiple journalists documented that admission. It entered the public record. And now, 7 weeks later, in a relaxed radio setting, that admission has been completely reversed. He would not do anything differently, no mistakes, nothing to walk back. The man who once acknowledged a potential error has become a man who sees none. That reversal is not an evolution in thinking. It is the behavior of someone managing a legal and political position rather than conducting an honest public accounting. The recall effort now underway in Pima County, built in part on the Arizona Republic's reporting about his El Paso disciplinary record, has created a situation where every public admission becomes a liability. The sheriff is no longer just managing an investigation. He is managing his own survival as an elected official. And those two objectives are not always compatible. His description of his own role in the investigation is worth sitting with specifically. In almost every high-profile case this country has seen in the last 20 years, the senior law enforcement official managing it stands in front of cameras and takes ownership. The buck stops here. My department, my investigation, my outcome. That is what accountability looks like from a position of leadership. And what Nanos offered instead was a careful separation between himself and the investigation's results. When progress happens, he is the leader of a highly qualified team. When criticism arrives, he is not the investigator. He just receives briefings. He acknowledged his team solved every single homicide in Pima County last year, which is genuinely impressive. But presenting your team's competence as a shield against scrutiny of your own leadership decisions is a maneuver, not a defense. His 98% no confidence vote from his own deputies did not happen because his investigators are incompetent. It happened because the people who work closest to him, who see how information flows, how decisions get made, and how the gap between what the department knows and what the sheriff says publicly operates, made a collective professional judgment about his fitness for leadership. The country is only now watching what Pima County's law enforcement community had already documented in writing before Nancy Guthrie ever disappeared. Then came the photographs. The FBI released images from Nancy's Google Nest camera, showing the suspect at her front door. One image with the Ozark Trail backpack, one without. 4 major television networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN, each reported through their own independent law enforcement sources that these images came from different days, not different moments of the same night. Separate visits on separate days. In the radio interview, And the sheriff maintained the position he has held since those images were released, that there is no time or date stamp on the photographs confirming they are from different days, and that saying otherwise would be irresponsible. 4 networks, 4 separate editorial teams, 4 separate law enforcement sources, each operating independently, all arriving at the same specific conclusion about the same specific evidence, and the sheriff calling all of it irresponsible. There are only 2 explanations for that gap. Either 4 independent networks with 4 separate sources are all simultaneously wrong about the same forensic detail, or the sheriff of Pima County is not being fully briefed by the FBI on what the analysis of those images has actually produced. Now, retired FBI agent Robin Drake raised this possibility weeks ago, suggesting that detectives working the case may be deliberately limiting what flows up to their own sheriff because they cannot trust what he will do with it in the next solo interview he gives to a different outlet. If that dynamic is real, then Nanos is not lying about the photographs. He genuinely does not know what his federal partners know. And that is a different kind of problem, one that is arguably worse. In the radio interview, the sheriff also made a comparison that I do not think he fully considered before he made it. When asked whether this case would ever be solved, he referenced the disappearance of a 6-year-old Tucson girl named Isabel Celis in 2012. Listen to it.
Itself. When I tell you that I believe this occurred or that occurred, that is my opinion. That's all that is. By other individuals in the case are investigators. They too have their thoughts and ideas and opinions, and I'm never going to set them down and say, no, that's not right or that's wrong. The case will get us there. We let the evidence show us the way, and that's what we base everything on. Right now, everything is speculative. We don't have anything in front of us that says, this is who did this and this is why. So, I get it. Things are said. Sometimes they're taken out of context. It really is, though, this case is a case that is probably unlike any case we've seen in years in Tucson. The closest I can come to it would be the Celis girl. She was kidnapped, taken out of her bedroom. I think you recall the family, the father specifically, really went through a lot in that case, and unjustifiably so.
And Tim, you actually posted about that case.
About that case. It took 10 years to get resolution on that.
He did not have to make that comparison. Of every case in American law enforcement history, cases solved in weeks by forensic genealogy, cases broken by a single tip, cases where the DNA results came back and closed everything, he chose a decade-long Tucson kidnapping that ended with a child's body found in the desert. The people of Tucson heard that. Nancy's family heard that. And the country following this investigation for 50 days heard the sheriff of Pima County tell them, in the most casual possible way, that his internal benchmark for this timeline is a case that took 10 years. That is not reassurance. That is the sheriff's actual expectations, slipping out in a relaxed setting, where his usual press conference discipline was not fully engaged. Then, there's the question of whether the suspect could strike again. Weeks ago, Nanos was asked that directly and answered with a single word, absolutely. A sheriff who had been saying consistently that this was a targeted abduction, meaning Nancy was chosen specifically because of who she is, simultaneously telling the public that the perpetrator could absolutely do this to anyone. In the radio interview, he tried to reframe that. He said it would be irresponsible for a law enforcement leader to tell the community to relax simply because this happened to a specific family. He said he wants people to be safe, to lock their doors, to pay attention to their surroundings. That is a reasonable public safety message. But it does not resolve the contradiction. If the abduction was targeted, driven by specific knowledge of Nancy's vulnerability, her daughter's public profile, then in a ransom calculation built on 2 decades of family proximity, then the risk profile for the general population is fundamentally different from what is absolutely suggested. The suspect is not a random predator who selects victims opportunistically. They had a specific motive connected to a specific family. Those two positions, targeted abduction and the perpetrator could strike anyone again, cannot both be accurate simultaneously. And the sheriff's inability to hold a consistent answer to this question across multiple interviews is either an indication that the working theory inside the investigation is still genuinely unsettled, or that what Nanos says publicly and what his investigators actually believe are operating on completely different tracks. Now step back from the individual updates of the last 24 hours and look at what they mean when laid against everything this series has documented since February 1st. Because the Guthrie family statement and the sheriff's radio interview do not exist in isolation. They land on top of a framework that has been building for 7 weeks. And when you place these new developments on that foundation, the picture that emerges is not ambiguous. The family's confirmation that someone local holds the key is not a new theory. It is the public arrival at a conclusion this series documented in detail across multiple videos. The person responsible has 20 years of intimate access to the Catalina foothills, the kind of neighborhood familiarity that cannot be built through deliberate surveillance, the kind of proximity to the victim's life that makes the intelligence this operation required simply a byproduct of ordinary existence. The family just told the city of Tucson that the FBI agrees. The answer is local. The answer has been local since the beginning. January 11th being named publicly for the first time in this statement connects directly to the documented pre-crime timeline. We know about January 23rd, the backward walker 6.5 miles from Nancy's home, testing camera sensor lag, suppressing the reflex to turn toward a barking dog. We know about January 24th, a Saturday that FBI agents have been asking neighbors about specifically. We know about February 1st, the night the operation ran. And now we know officially that January 11th, a Sunday evening 3 weeks before the abduction, is a date the FBI wants the public's help with. Every one of those dates falls on or near a weekend. Every one of them represents a window that belongs to someone whose working week is Monday through Friday. The weekend pattern in this investigation is not a coincidence. It is a schedule. And it belongs to someone whose name has appeared in this series from the beginning. Whatever the sheriff does or does not understand about his own investigation, the forensic science running beneath it does not require his competence to produce results. It requires time. The genetic genealogy is active on 2 DNA profiles simultaneously, 2 family trees being built from public ancestry databases, 2 independent chains of ancestry that need only one distant relative, one person who submitted their DNA to a consumer service years ago without a second thought, to close on a name. Cece Moore of Parabon Nanolabs has confirmed this publicly and expressed complete confidence in eventual identification. Her word was time, not possibility. Time. The cell tower cross-reference from January 23rd is being processed. That night the suspect believed was invisible. The dress rehearsal the ring camera was supposed to miss. The night the dog was not supposed to bark. Almost certainly captured them without precautions. Their phone was in their pocket. They drove their own vehicle. They connected to cell towers along a route between a home and a driveway 6.5 miles from Nancy's property. Damn, that data sits on servers that do not forget and do not negotiate. If 2 phones from the same documented social circle appear in both the January 23rd and February 1st tower datasets, phones belonging to 2 individuals with a 19-year relationship living within the same geographic triangle in northern Tucson, that is not circumstantial. That is a forensic signature. The router from Nancy's home has been in FBI possession since the first week of February. Every device that came within wireless range of that router on February 1st, with Wi-Fi enabled, may have left a digital fingerprint in its probe request logs, a MAC address, a device identifier, a list of previously connected networks that can place a specific phone at a specific address on a regular basis. Router log analysis does not take months. Whatever that router contains has already been read by someone in the federal building in Tucson, where the task force is working. And now, January 11th is officially a public investigative question. The family's statement is about to generate a new wave of tips, camera footage, and neighbor recollections, specifically focused on that Sunday evening. One of those tips may place a specific vehicle or a specific person near Nancy's property on a date when no innocent explanation exists for their presence. That placement, documented on January 11th, does not require a crime to have occurred that night. It requires only that someone was there who should not have been, who had no ordinary reason to be at or near that address on a Sunday evening in January, and whose presence on that night, connected to their presence on February 1st, informs a pattern that a jury will not find difficult to read. The investigation is not cold. The sheriff said that in his radio interview and on this specific point, the evidence supports him, not because of his leadership, but despite it. The task force working out of the FBI's Tucson field office is building something that the public cannot see yet. The forensic threads are converging. The family statement has focused the public's attention on a specific date and a specific geography for the first time. And the science running in laboratories and on servers across the country is moving toward a name, whether anyone cooperates with it or not. The sheriff compared this case to one that took 10 years. The science that is running right now identified the Golden State Killer after 40 years and connected Brian Kohberger to 4 murders within weeks of the crime. The technology available in this investigation is not the technology of 2012. The genealogy databases are larger. The processing capability is faster. The forensic methodology is more precise. And the FBI task force sitting in a federal building in Tucson is not working on a 10-year timeline. They are working on the timeline the evidence is producing. And the evidence is producing results that have not yet been made public. Nancy Guthrie sat at her daughter's dinner table 50 days ago. She ate a meal with her family. She let her son-in-law drive her home. She walked through her front gate. The garage door closed behind her, and 4 hours later, her pacemaker sent its last signal at 2:28 in the morning. She left her medication on the counter. She left her hearing aids in the house. She left her phone on the nightstand. She was 84 years old, and she did not choose to leave. She was taken by someone who knew her home, who knew her street, who knew which cameras to blind and how to blind them, and who had been planning this since at least January 11th. Her family cannot grieve. They can only ache and wonder. They want to celebrate her beautiful and courageous life, and they cannot do that until she is brought to a final place of rest. If you live in Tucson or anywhere in southern Arizona, if anything from the late evening of January 11th sits differently in your memory now than it did when you first experienced it, please check your cameras. Review your text messages. Think back to anything that seemed insignificant at the time. The family is asking you specifically because the FBI has told them to ask specifically. The answer to what happened to Nancy Guthrie is not entirely in a laboratory. Part of it is in someone's memory right now. And that someone may be watching this video. The tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. The Pima County Sheriff's Department can be reached at 5203-514-900. Online tips are accepted at tips.fbi.gov. The reward is $1.2 million, payable in cash, with anonymous reporting accepted. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 50 days. Her family is still waiting. And the science, the tips, and the January 11th public appeal are all closing in on the same address at the same time. Someone in Tucson knows. And it is only a matter of time before the evidence confirms what they know, whether they come forward or not.